Hi everyone, welcome to the next screencast. Today we are looking at demography. What we're going to look at today and also in the lesson next week is we're going to look specifically at the last 100 years or so in the UK and how there's been changes in population, etc, etc. What we will be able to do is define what demography is, identify any reasons for these changes and evaluate the consequences of these changes. So what is demography? Well, basically it's the study of population and the characteristics of the population. So for instance, the size, how many people live in the country, etc. And also the age structure, so what is the dependency ratio, what is the average age, etc, etc. Demography is affected by four things mainly. Positives and negatives, so things that lead to an increase in population are things like birth and immigration. Things that lead to a decline and less people living here is deaths obviously, and emigration. First thing we're going to look at is birth rate, and that's BR. If you see it BR anywhere in the lesson or on this screencast, it means birth rate, and that's the birth rate is the number of live births per 1,000 of the population per year. Now there's been a decline since around about the turn of the 20th century, where there was 28.7, so just short of 29 live births per 1,000, and that dropped to 2007 to just over 10. Things that we can take into consideration when we look at these kind of things, and there's major changes where there wasn't a decline. So baby boom in the 1960s. And also just after the World War, and obviously there was a big decline during the World War of live births as well, so we need to take into consideration those kind of things, but generally there's been a decline over time. Total fertility rate as well. Basically what total fertility rate is the number of children that a woman would have during their childbearing ages, so that's between the age of about 15 and say 45, 44, 45, and how many children a woman would have during that time. Now, total fertility rate hit an all-time low in 2001, where it was 1.63 children per woman of childbearing age. Now the boom was in the 1960s, as I said, where total fertility rate reached nearly 3 children per woman of childbearing age. It's quite a big difference there. So why a decline in birth rate then? Well, first of all, the position of women has changed, so they are more career orientated. The position of women within the family and also within the society has changed, so they're not seen as needing to go and get married and have a family. Also, the introduction of contraception and abortions being more widespread means that there's less children being born, obviously. Infant mortality rate as well. There's been a decline in infant mortality rate, and that means a decline in the number of babies being born. So infant mortality rate, the number of children who die before they reach their first birthday. In the turn of the 20th century, 15% of all babies died, and that was a massive amount, and that is decreased obviously over time. And because of that, you know, if 15% of all babies were going to die, you were going to have more babies, especially when we think about the social and economic reasons that we had children back then. So there's been a decline in birth rate because there's a decline in infant mortality rate. This links into the March of Progress ideas that we discussed last week as well about childhood, because we have laws and we have different norms now where we treat children differently. We have children for different reasons, and because of that there's been a decline. So laws banning children from going into labour, compulsory education, mean they are expensive. They become economically dependent on the parents rather than bringing money in. And also this idea of child-centeredness, we look at our children now as being the central point of our family rather than having them for material uses. So the effects that this has on changes in fertility, etc., as a result we have smaller families now. People are having less babies. It means that we are having smaller families. Also, the dependency ratio changes as well. So that is the ratio of people of working age against non-working age or dependents. Okay, so the less children that we have, then the dependency ratio is decreased because we have more people who are working than who are dependent. children make up the largest part of the dependent population, so a falling number reduces the burden of dependency on the working population, so taxes and things like that. Death rates, okay. Death rates are the number of deaths per 1,000 of the population per year, not to be confused with the number of deaths. So the number of deaths haven't really changed that much, to be honest with you. Obviously taking into consideration things like wars and things like that, but really it stays at around about 600,000 per year approximately. So the death rate is the number who die per 1,000 of the population, and that's been declining since 1900. Obviously, again, taking into consideration world wars where there was a high death rate, but generally it's been declining. So in the turn of the century there was around about 19 per 1,000 of the population died. That's nearly halved in 2007 to about 10. Tranter in 1996 looked at reasons for this, and basically Tranter I found that over 3/4 of the deaths between say the middle of the 19th century through to just past the middle of the 20th century were because of infectious diseases such as like measles, smallpox, diarrhea, tuberculosis, things like that. And young people were affected most commonly by that, and obviously died more. Hence, a decline in, hence a big infant mortality rate. So Tranter sees, the eradication of these sort of diseases as being one of the reasons why there's been a decline in death rates. However, some believe that more social factors rather than medical, like biological factors, play a bigger role in the fall in the death rate. So McKeown looks at improved nutrition, so people have better access to better foods, supplements, clean water and things like that. And McKeown believes that this has led to basically, this half reduction in the death rate. Other reasons is major improvements in things such as medical, so we have better access to NHS and also medical care. We have more skilled health workers. We also have people who are dedicated children doctors. We have better advances in medical technology and things like that. So that improves in the a decline in death. So there's a decline in the death rate. We have better public health and also a better environment as well. It's a cleaner environment. We live in better housing. We have Clean Air Acts and stuff like that. CFCs means that there's less harmful emissions, which can affect the ozone layer and things like that. And also within society, we have better jobs. We have safer jobs as well, so we have less industrialised jobs. Or if we do have industrialised jobs because of technology, it means technology's doing it rather than people. We've got better education as well, which means that people can go on to do better jobs and gain more money and afford better things such as nutrition and better cleaner food and stuff like that. And as a result of that, we have income which is on the rise, which again means that we have a healthier lifestyle. So what does this mean then? In terms of populations and things like that? Well, life expectancy is obviously increased. So at the turn of the century, men were going to live until around about 50 and females 57, and this has increased by quite a lot actually. In 2005, the average age was just short of 77 for a man and well over 80 for females. Now, the thing is that we need to take into consideration here is individual aspects. So, your class, your gender, and also regional differences, so where you live. So for instance, people who live in the north and who live in Scotland, their life expectancy is lower than those in the south. And also people who work in like unskilled jobs tend to die before say the 65 compared to men who work in like more managerial or professional jobs. So we need to take that into consideration. We obviously have now an ageing population as well. If we are living longer, then the average age is going to increase. So in the 1970s, the average age was just over 34. That increased to just short of 40 in 2007, and it's projected that it's going to increase to around about 42.6 in 2031. So, death rate, etc., has a major impact on population, and as a result has a major impact on other things such as public services, dependence ratios, etc. We're really going to look at the effects of the ageing population quite a bit in class this week, so you don't need to worry about that too much now. Right, so we're going to look at migration. Migration is basically the movement of people. So immigration means people move in to the area. Emigration means people move out. So we would emigrate to Australia, where people immigrate into our country currently. Net migration basically means the amount of people leaving the country compared to the amount of people coming in. So if it's a negative, it means there's more people leaving. If it's a positive, then it means there's more people coming in and the population increases. So some statistics and some reasons for this. Until the 1980s, the number of immigrants were actually lower than the people leaving the country, so there was less coming in than going out, so we had a decline in population. In the 1950s through to the 1970s, there was a big change and an increase in immigration, and it started with Caribbean people coming in the 1950s, and this moved through to more like kind of South Asian people in the 60s through to African immigration in the 1970s. By 2001, minority ethnic groups were nearly about 8% of all the population, and obviously that changes family patterns and lifestyles, etc., which we discussed last week when it came to childhood. There were restrictions on non-white immigration into this country until the 1990s, which is quite surprising because it doesn't seem a long way off. And after that, then there wasn't as many restrictions on non-white immigration. The EU continues to expand rapidly, so recently we had UKIP getting all over the back of these Romanians and Bulgarians coming in to take all of our jobs. So the rise of the EU, and it really started expanding in the early 2000s, where people from Poland, etc., could come to our country to work or to study. In 2004, net migration was plus 223,000, so that means 223,000 more people were coming into this country than leaving us. This obviously has a major impact on population, but who is emigrating? So it's mainly young people, and they're coming here to work or study. Now the difference between work and study is quite important, because people who come to study tend to go home once they've finished studying, whereas people who come here to work tend to stay. The reasons, as I say, is to work and study, and this has an impact on the population levels. Migration will account for approximately half of all increase in population over the next few years. The dependency ratio, now this is a bit complex because these people who are coming in are of a working age, so it means that the dependency ratio goes down. But what you tend to find is foreign families have more children, which means that the population will increase and the average age will decrease. And as we've discussed already, children are the main people who are dependent on the state and on others as well. And the other thing we need to take into consideration is internal migration. Thinking back to Parsons and the industrialisation and the change in nuclear family, people had to move around to get jobs and to find employment. And that has an impact in that if you move away and you have no family surrounding you, you may have less children or be less likely to have children because you don't have that support network. So that's really important to think about as well when we think about migration and people moving. That is all for this week. We will be discussing specifically the effects and impact of migration, and also on decline in death rates and increase in immigration in class. I'll see you all next week. Bye bye.